Hello, everybody. Welcome to AIGA's Fireside Chat. Thanks for joining us today. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded and will be available for viewing post-event. We're also live streaming to our followers on LinkedIn and Facebook. Please remember that all AIGA events follow our code of conduct. Please connect with us and share your thoughts. The hashtags for this fireside are AIGA Design and Future of Design. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome Benif Johnson, AIGA's Executive Director, and today's guest, Robbie Tseng, Vice President, Growth Marketing Design for HBO Max. Benny?
Thank you, Amy. And greetings, everyone. Welcome to our special fall edition of our Fireside Chat. And today I'm honored to have with us strategic designer, team leader, storyteller, story builder, and most importantly, son, Robbie Tseng. Robbie is the VP of Growth Marketing and Design for HBO Max at Warner Media. In this role, he oversees design that touches every aspect of the HBO Max consumer journey. He's managing innovation at a world-class scale and design organization that he's built, designed to create, test, learn, and then scale. The team's talent ranges all over our design arenas, from digital and visual journey to copy to motion graphics, full stack design, design management, strategies, and efficiencies. And Robbie's work and his team comes from inception through execution across all of the growth marketing touch points. Basically, Robbie and his group are responsible for bringing the acquisition, lifecycle, campaign, and editorial to life on the HBO Max platform. Robbie's been an experienced marketer with a great history, specifically in entertainment and television. For the last 15 years, his journey has taken him to fashion, e-commerce, and mobile. Along the way, he's had traditional training and some dynamic experiences we want to talk about. A graduate of RISD, Robbie's an incredible designer and with the mindset for tech startups and empowerment. So today I'm happy to welcome to our Fireside Chat, Robbie. Robbie, thank you.
Great to be here. I'm not used to hearing it read back to me like that with a podcast voice. That was cool.
Well, you have to get a proper introduction. I'm really delighted that you're able to come and sit down with us and share. I just want to talk a little bit about your journey.
Sure.
It's really interesting. It's like, Brad, you're heading up design for HBO Max. But I'd love to start a little bit about what that role is now and then get a sense of your journey. What brought you there?
Yeah, so I think where do you even begin? But I feel like this particular job, it's probably like, everything has come to a moment where it all makes sense. You take one step at a time as you move through your journey of your career when you're making nothing. And it didn't even dawn to me until a little bit into my career, like, oh, I should be working in TV somehow. And I found a job somehow, like early on, 2 years after doing some fashion. And I had just been running in that direction ever since, and saw all the evolution from as the App Store came about, or agile methodology came about, responsive web, product design as a thing. I had a journey in product design for a while in TV. And then one thing leads to another as you move through different, changes within corporate environments, whether it's like mergers, which we're going through one now, and I went through a big one with DirecTV and AT&T before. You learn a lot, not only as a designer, but as sort of, whether you're moving up to an executive, like that kind of training is very valuable, although it's very hard. One thing leads to another, and I feel like it's the perfect moment to work for somewhere like HBO Max, where everything I learned along the way, it's everything we wanted things to go to in a world of data and technology, and things are moving faster. The technology is better in terms of how you can move as a designer. But along the way, I learned a lot of things about how to build an organization when they had developers report into me, or research, which doesn't report into me now, but I understand it more because it did, or having project management as part of a wing of my team. So when this opportunity came about, HBO Max, it was great. And it's a once in a lifetime chance to build the org from scratch when the name wasn't even announced yet when I came in. And I think having that resilience through all that I've been through before made me, sort of a perfect fit for this opportunity. So I've been running ever since. And now looking back on the 2 years in this role, I have, roughly 80 different people on my team, which is super exciting. And you're like, wow, I can't believe, looking back on your career that you would end up in this sort of position.
Yeah. Did you ever think when you were studying at RISD that a few years later you'd be putting together a team from scratch that just didn't include classic design, but as you mentioned?
Oh my goodness. I've been thinking a lot about my past. So actually, I don't know if any of my old RISD colleagues might have seen this on LinkedIn and they're here. These two drawings in the back, I found a stack of drawings. Those are from RISD. I'm back in my childhood home. I'm normally in New York because my father, he passed away in June. And as a leader, like I find it hard. I think it's also because, when you grow up as a closeted gay person trying to figure out who you are, you repress a lot of things. And you're also more observant of yourself and all these other things. But now I'm going back through a lot of reflection, and I always feel that I have to be forthcoming of what's going on in my life and open myself up so people can open up back to me. And that's how you can be a good leader. And so saying things like in this forum that my father just passed away in June, it's been really hard. It was really fast, pancreatic cancer from March now. So I've been doing a lot of looking back in my past. Suddenly I'm surrounded with all the things that I was rejecting. Like I'm no longer from Ohio. I'm a New Yorker now. Like you had these big dreams and then you realize, oh, I hit them all. And then you're going back to your roots. And so seeing these old drawings from RISD, I didn't expect I would get this far. I just sort of chose what I wanted to do at 16 and kept on going. And my parents took a huge risk on letting me pursue design, go to RISD, spend a lot of money on RISD. And it did pay off. And my dad was so proud at the end. Like, I can't stop thinking about how happy he was that my parents were super transparent. Like the daddy can't get higher than manager because he has an accent and he's only 5'8", my mom used to say. And those are real things that we talk about now with Asian hate. But I was trained on, like, I would face these ceilings and I cracked through a lot of them. And I'd love to talk about this throughout this discussion too, is if you're a designer that wants to go up, you have to like get along with people, right? But eventually you have to carve out your own role because there are no higher roles in design and people are seeing the value in that now. And so you have to be in those positions where you start fighting for your own role and your own organization. But yeah, to answer your question, I did not expect to get to this point, but all the foundation of who you are was already there. And so looking back at all these things and these stories that I built back in college and connecting to my dad now, I think it's all come together. And it's kind of like, wow, if you believe in yourself and other people believe in you early on, all the building blocks will be set a long time in the past.
I remember when we were talking, one of the things we were sharing with both of our fathers passing away and kind of looking back over the career choices you're saying, one of the things that you said to me is really touching, that your dad had completely different experience, but he was able to have a conversation with you and talk about how proud he was of you to see how you had kind of taking your love and passion and skill and training and turned it into this professional space that you are right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm super lucky because I went to a lot of Taiwanese summer camps growing up, and they would talk a lot about how my friends in the camp would talk about how their parents were making them become a doctor or an engineer or what have you. My dad was super liberal, and also with the whole gay thing too. He probably knew a while before I told him, and he never told me I had to be more masculine or anything like that. And that's a recent realization, by the way. So it is really cool to see that moment of him. He must have been proud of himself of how he raised me in those moments too. Is like, I think he got a lot of flack from, his peers. You're letting Robbie go to art school. But look at us now, right? Like, look at, the class under me with Airbnb, like that came from RISD as well. So it's very exciting to see that journey. And, if there was one thing that I brought to this life for him, other than taking care of him on his way out and taking care of my mom now, was that he got to see that and like all this fighting to be in this country and for his place here was not, for waste.
Right. When we think about kind of the work you're doing now and the team, one of the things you just mentioned that struck me about the work as well was making a way and finding a way to take your kind of core skills and make a path for there. What encouragement do you have for people to creating their own agency in terms of their career?
Oh man, it's like a mixture. So I should talk a little bit about how I recruited my team and what I envisioned for it, because I
That would
think
be
it'll
great.
color in
Yeah,
like a lot of like the complexities to how
right. Because you
my
you
thought
really
process
built this
works
thing
on
from
it.
scratch. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like I was always in a position, like there's one line that I use a lot, especially when you get into a low performing situations, like, are you making everybody's job easier around you? Whether they're below you, above you, to the side of you. And I knew for something launching HBO Max, a whole team come together from scratch. Nobody knows what they're doing yet because it's brand new, but it's a startup like within an environment. You have to recruit in a way where people like me are spread throughout, where they actually did what they're leading, right? So they can throw down if things get really hairy, but they also can go to a room with an executive and articulate things and just have that seat at the table. So the most important thing is to build a team that can have that equal seat at the table. That's what all designers want. And
right.
otherwise, these ideas don't even come up. And that's when you just become if you're just sitting here waiting for someone's brief, you're just going to become an execution arm of somebody else, right? And you'll never get to an organization of this stature. But on top of that, the mechanics of my team, you have to also build a team that can do a variety of things. You can build it. So going straight to code, like
Right.
that's a full stack side of my team. All the creatives that you typically see, like the traditional creative titles still exist, from the creative directors to the writers to the motion designers, visual designers. Then you have the programmatic aspects. I have a design program team that can get to scale in a variety of ways. Super advanced technology with media, keeping an eye on what should we do on Snapchat, what should we do on these other platforms, and then people that can run all the systems. Like there's a side of my team that runs all the imagery through all the app, but they also know how to project manage. Put it all together under one org. You can just go do anything and innovate on anywhere, and then you combine that with the goals of you know having a target of like growth with
Right.
KPIs, and then using data. But I think there's a patience level that everyone has to have, where you are somebody's partner,
Right.
and as a designer you're trained on communication, right? There's a lot of different majors I could have gone into. The one I wanted to go into was graphic design. Everyone told me to go into other ones. I chose the right path because of the communication aspect, because as a leader you have to be a good communicator, but it also funnels through your design. But some designers kind of want it all at once. You just have to have a little bit of patience. It took me my entire career to get to where I am, and you will turn around like I did, like, oh wow. But also, if you build the right culture, follow that
Right.
culture. Sometimes you want to follow the right leaders too to get to that space before you can do it yourself.
So I want to ask you a question that we talked before about risk taking,
Mm.
both in your own personal journey, but how you encourage that. We talked about the power of that, encouraging that in your team to move beyond the brief.
Yeah, it's
Right.
interesting. Like it sometimes you have to, like, that's where you have to have the right leaders in place, and then build it all the way down where they can just go to you for anything. Like me talking about like my father's death in front of everyone, hopefully that opens up anyone to talking to
Right.
me about anything. But in terms of risk, you just want those lines always open. So even if they don't know how to take the risk yet, they can come to you. The problem, it is aired out, and you're able to just say, hey, any complaint, anything can be done. But then it's just simply also watching by example. Like we all had those bosses where they'll tell you to do something, but you never see them doing it themselves. That's what I try to avoid, and try to teach my
Right.
team to not be like that as well. That's where the hands-on people in the leadership roles really helps. Like they actually did what you did on some level, or understand it. Um, and I think that's the combination. You have to show them that you're taking risks for them. Like, oh, I'll take the heat for that. I'm going to assume that risk, because then otherwise everyone's frozen. That's when you're like, you just get the brief. This is a rule that you can't break. No, go talk to the person that wrote the brief and say, is this really what you need? And then they'll appreciate that partnership too. So the risk goes all the way around. You just sort of have to believe in your intuition. And if you pair that with good communication skills and being a good partner, facilitating good ideas together, even if it's your idea, it's everybody's idea, that's what it feels like, I think that risk becomes easier. But when it comes down to it, I think the biggest thing is that showing by example, like being willing to go into a room for your team, and they'll see you do it, and then you'll slowly also back up tools to teach them along the way. But you have to pair both of them together. You can't just tell them to do one thing and not actually do it yourself.
I think that's a powerful point,
Yeah.
right? Kind of demonstrating itself. So then you're kind of coaching and leading
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, but also building up the foundational skills that go along. So these are calculated risks that you're taking. right?
Yeah, and got to give people a chance too, right? And you can't just you can't have everyone stay at the same level the whole time. You have to recognize the talent too, and give them those opportunities and recognize individual talents that are ready to take those next steps.
And, I think that's important for everyone, wherever you are in your career path, to think about that, to come back.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting for you in your industry, in the space, on the entertainment and media space. You're always kind of breaking on the cutting edge, and your design team has to be equally as responsive. How has that been?
Oh, it's been crazy. So, it's interesting, like having done it myself before, even the little things like, drawing vectors or masking things out. Right? I've been watching on TikTok all these things about how people mask on Photoshop now. It takes like 2 seconds. We don't have to waste time like learning technology, right? Like at RISD, they didn't teach us the technology. They're like, we're going to teach you how to like think and how to problem solve. You'll figure it out on your own. Yeah, I spent a lot of time figuring it out on my own, making $30,000 a year, just like, eating a lot of ramen, in New York. But now we don't have to waste our time on that. So the structure of my team like is built to produce a lot. And everything's data centric now. And if you look at even the virality of social media, that's almost like a data centric thing too. You just have to put it all out there and see what happens, and not get precious about things. So because we can go straight to code, and because we have an in-house team that's very robust, and then we have a nimble leadership team that really understands it, it's just the volume, right? You have to like be able to produce a lot of volume, problem solve on the fly, move fast. You can't sit there and like overly document things and then hand it off to a team to interpret and then like a code and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's the volume and speed to market that's really important to innovate now. And it goes down to the team structure and the talent too, to do so.
It speaks a lot to the success formula that you built, the credibility and reliability, that the business depends on the design-led function to thrive. Right. That's you're not asking.
It's no clearer moment than now. Like I think everyone's realizing it. They're seeing the value. And if you that's why I got really excited when my career pivoted. I remember there's one. I didn't think of this story before, but there was this turning point during the merger where they're like, Robbie, you can go this path. And because I did entertainment design too and product design, or you could, go over here to this other team. And, I knew I might have a shot as director at that point if I went to this other path where it was about acquisition, which I also like. They're the supervisor, like, I think you're better at, you're more interested in entertainment. I'm like, that's not necessarily true. I like a lot of things. And so I had to follow my intuition. I'm like, I actually think there's a lot of opportunity here on this other side. And so growth, we didn't call it that back then. But what's attractive to me about being in a growth and revenue organization and running a growth design org is it's tied to key metrics. And that challenge is super tangible. And the results you see in real time of, are you headed in the right direction? So I think that's super exciting, like that aspect of things.
I think it's really powerful. As we were saying before, when we were in school studying, you didn't have the conversations all the time about having great strategic design tied in with the strategy of their organization and such.
It was all fundamentals of the design. Yeah. All this stuff I had to learn through really, really hard scenarios and observation of an entire career of working with different types of people and, difficult situations that I would never want to be in again. Like now we have a better understanding of what's right and wrong and like what you'll put up with. But all those different experiences make you stronger, especially if you have that foundation of empathy and observational skills, but you have to put that against like being firm in the right times. Like I didn't get to where I am by not saying what was on my mind. And I kind of have a reputation for finding a way to just get it out there, like whatever someone's worried about, even if it's through something a little bit funny, or you just recognize like the elephant in the room. Because I guarantee you, if you compare, like, if you want to get into the upper echelons of any organization, if that's what your thing is, being in a in-house environment and really pushing for an organization that has equal, I'm still fighting in different ways for even more, right? And that's, I think, the whole point. But I guarantee you, someone who's in a more typical role that has an MBA, usually a man, they're not going to sit there and not say something if something's wrong in that meeting. Mm-hmm. So same thing for someone for design. You just got to speak up, and trust that if you say the right thing, for the right reasons, like it's not going to land poorly. In fact, they probably appreciate it, because if it's not said, then it never gets solved. No one is even addressing it.
Right. So we talk about this kind of having a seat at the table. And once you're at the table, that's not where the journey ends, right?
It's a constant journey. That's the whole job. I was just talking to I think one of the art directors on my team who has a fantastic journey of her own, and she's also in this diversity council that I sponsor at HBO Max. But like getting that equal seat is hard, but that's the whole point. Like once you're there, anything can happen. And I think showing that, what I hope is like all the things that I'm trying to expedite on all the different people on my team to not have to learn it over 15 years like I did. And hopefully someday they're going to be running the show with that mentality. Like I can have an equal seat. I can be a partner. And I see it. That's like the biggest, I don't know, how many managers are in the room, their first time managing, and you decide to pull away from hands-on design yourself. And then you see someone that you might've given them feedback, but you got something better than you could have done. And you're like, oh, this feels really good. Not everyone's going to take that journey. Some people will stay IC and it's really good for them. But if you're on that path up, that feeling is irreplaceable. And so there's only hope. The same way that technology is making everyone be able to make any kind of content they want on TikTok in a way I could never do myself as at that age. As an organization, who knows where we'll be as designers in the future, how big of a seat we'll have because of all of us and what we're doing right now.
So you've mentioned TikTok twice. So I have.
Oh yeah, it's been on my mind because I migrated away from the other platforms. Yeah,
I know it, and you said it twice. So I'm going to ask the question. So how has that experience been for you? Kind of digging into, a platform that didn't exist 10 years ago or 20 years ago. As you kind of think about innovation.
I was avoiding TikTok because I know it's for Gen Z and I'm in my 40s, right? And so there was a point when in my grief journey, and I'm still in the thick of it, right? Like they say, it's going to take at least a year to get in good perspective on this. But I couldn't go on Instagram anymore because there was something about it, or Facebook, because I had this life where, I was still maintaining, because my dad was super proud of this job. I'm still going to this place has provided me a lot of grounding, and my team as well. But I found I couldn't go on Facebook and these other places because I didn't like seeing people just like showing off being at bars and whatever. Like it's just not where I am right now. And then I inched my way, but I'm at home. And if you grew up in Ohio like I did, part of the reason you went to RISD or you went to the East Coast was you had these big dreams and you wanted all that's out there. I already did all that, right? And that's the interesting perspective that I didn't gain. But you also get bored and you need to channel your energy in other places. Right. So digging through old art or gardening or with TikTok, I think what I enjoy about TikTok is the goal is entertainment. And there is that data aspect too. There's a gamification aspect where it's like, oh, how is this work where someone's going to see me? My goal is not to become like a TikTok star, but that paired with my journey of going through a lot of my RISD journey, for some reason, I was heavily focused on my father, and a lot of my art was about my father. I have some pieces that scattered around here. And so digging through all my old computers, I was trying to find any picture of my dad, and I found like my old Zanga archives, and people used to blog. And so I thought, what if I go on TikTok and just start blogging some of my grief journey? And so getting into those tools, I'm like, wow, there's so many things you could do now. Imagine what these kids are going to be making 10 years from now. Right. I just think that aspect of it, like a lot of things can go sideways with all these social media platforms, but there is a story of like hope within it all. That's pretty exciting, I think.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about, you spend times each day helping to amplify these epic stories, right? These cinematic stories, these big stories in there, but having the moments for your team and your work is also about these authentic human stories.
Oh, absolutely. And the same art director I referenced, I'll give you an example. So I know you're a big HBO Max fan. So this, we are, as you said at the beginning, all the consumer journeys from bringing people in through ads to that. But in the platform, it's an easy example. When you see things like Black Voices or Black History Month, you can have, through our diversity group where we tell our own stories, make sure people are represented that are making things. For example, Jazz on my team, putting some meaning behind the art through her story. You might not see the story, but you can feel it, that there's a meaning behind the way the light glows and what that emotion is supposed to feel because they felt it. And when you don't have that story, so you try to recruit a diverse team so everyone's represented, but also if you have the right culture within your organization and our greater marketing org that I sit around, you can also create processes like Jazz did, where she created it hey, everybody, reach into these channels of the diversity council or whatever and say, hey, we have this Asian voices thing. It's not hitting. Robbie says it's not hitting. Can you guys come in? We're just going to talk about our stories and see like what kind of inspirational ideas we can get. And then that you'll see it and you'll feel it in the platform. But it also works where he's like, is this offensive? Like certain things like that as well. Like, so I do think you have to have, when you don't have diversity of your team and you don't have that openness to tell your own story, to tell your own truth, to bring your authentic self to your work in a very mechanical and data centric sometimes environment. That's when you put it all together. You got this artistic human story side, then you have the data and science and the KPI driven environment. That's pretty magical, I think. And I think that's one of the special, unique things about my team.
But one of the things that stuck with me when we were talking last, at the end, you said that your work at HBO Max was about the art and science of design. And I think you just kind of described that.
I think so, right? Yeah.
And in that space, and really that you hear it when you talk about it, it completely comes back and it's reinforced.
Absolutely.
One's not more dominant than the other.
And it's not going to stop too, right? Like we need to get more advanced in how scientific we are. But then there's that other X factor that only talent can provide, that like, oh, this doesn't feel right. You have to bring that too. That's what HBO is really known for, right? Like the artistic side.
Right.
So I think that's really the future that we're all looking at.
So when you think about building your team, so, you built it from scratch and there was certain types of team players you were looking for at the beginning. Now that you've grown, how's that changed or modified? Are there lessons that you learned in building the team?
Oh, geez. I have to say I'm pretty lucky. Like I think the retention aspect of my team is fairly high, right? And I think I learned a million lessons along the way, but they're all like very granular lessons of like different, I would have done it this way or that way. That would have been easier to get where I needed to go. But the vision was always there. So I think the vision that I had in the beginning maybe has exceeded my expectations in some ways. So now it's all about like the maintenance mode of the team. Right. So I'm actually not looking at I rarely look back at like what I should have done. You just have to look forward because there's no point in like dwelling on things that you could have done and what would have happened if you did that. Like that's not going to happen, So looking forward of what other turns I'm going to, like, how can I make sure everyone's has space to grow even more?
Right.
And then guiding them through like all the next steps of the challenges of the next year. I think it's all about that singular brain when you have an in-house design organization. That's the point, right? Is that the whole organization as a unit is growing and they can reference everything they've already done collectively and not waste our time going through those same experiences of like, oh, it's easier to work with this person or this group in that way, or they're looking for that, or we can't do that because of X, Y, and Z reason that's super sensitive because of talent or what have you. It's already there, so we can just move forward. And so my goal actually is to get the team together soon to focus on new goals, create new goals together. And so we're all marching towards one vision. I think all the building blocks are already there, and it's just more about like, where else can we go?
I was going to ask you a question about really under togetherness, under this new togetherness. I'm in the same spot where for the last 2 years, my team has been all across the country, and I'm looking forward to us getting together to kind of physically be in a space to tackle the future. So like, what are you most looking to? If you've got a group of like 80 now.
Geez. Well, so it's all over. Yeah. Like, it's like, some aspects are more remote. I've been thinking a lot about this because I think we haven't figured it out, right? Like the whole world has changed. There was a point when my father died, like literally everything in my life had changed, even like certain things around my peers and stuff. Like I came back from leave and everything was different and the world was still changing with this COVID, the remote. Some companies are going to get more, like stay a little longer. But there's a lot of benefits that did feel closer to more, like, for example, East Coast versus West Coast, like that vibe is a little bit different now where people don't even know where some people work, unless they ask them 3 or 4 times. I think there's a model where that closeness can work. And my team, by the way, has brought me a ton of ideas of how they've even formed their own groups because like they want to they want to like bring people even closer together.
Right.
There's a segment of my team that really wants to be together, and you're going to encourage that, right? Because it's up to them to come in if they want. But I think that old model is going to take a while to come back. Everyone's just going to be back at the same time.
Right.
So what I'm most worried about actually is the mixed environment, because we've all been in meetings where some people are in a room together and some people aren't, and it gets super chaotic. I hate more than one conversation at one time because you want to see everything to get to the solution. And if I can't listen to all of you, like, at once, it's not gonna, it's gonna drive me crazy. But you want to make sure it doesn't get imbalanced as we start getting more hybrid. There will be a world where we might be back together. I don't know, like nobody knows how this is all going to play out. So you just want to make sure you're constantly looking at it each day and maintaining those connections. I try to connect with people as much as I can. As a leader, I prefer to see everyone's face, but sometimes, you can't just say everyone turn your cameras on. But I think as an employee, though, I would encourage you to turn your cameras on, because that human connection with your various supervisors is important, I think. And you might, gain something from that little bit of human connection that you don't realize just by seeing someone's face on the camera and them seeing you.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, even as we sit down and we do these talks and these conversations, it's about bringing people in. And how many times do we get a chance to talk to a senior design leader and have, candid conversations? And this is empowering for everyone.
For sure. And by the way, there's a lot of data, like, we do a lot of, science behind, various points of key art or whatever, like, and marketing. You always hear that faces are what pull people in. Right. If you're going through, HBO Max with your family, they're going to recognize a face and feel that emotion there. So like, it actually plays it into like this work environment too. Body language gets you far too. You don't even have to say something, and something different could come out of the conversation by the look on your face.
Well, I think we're going to have an opportunity to constantly recalibrate, right? And kind of figuring out as we go forward, which then allows us to manage our teams in a more active way.
Yeah, it's how you manage your team. Like that stuff that I was talking to about, like you look at the data, look at the art too, but constantly change and be fast. It's also how you run a team, and that culture aspect too. You just have to constantly tweaking at it. And so to answer your other question, yeah, that's what we're just going to keep on doing, is like everything that the team brings to me that might be a concern, you just have to keep on nipping at it. Rarely can you just sit back and then build a whole system and then just put it out there. It's going to work. You constantly have to go back to it.
So we're always talking about learning. So I'm going to ask you this one question.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you've had a chance to come back and spend time in your childhood home, in your family, what's the one thing you've learned about yourself recently?
Oh, geez. The one thing I've learned about recently, maybe not the one thing that I learned about recently. I think I've been thinking a lot about who I was,
right?
And that the me was already there. And that journey, like you look at my dad's life, right? You think about his whole life, what it led to. There's all these weird moments that I've been finding of coincidence, of like the date that my father died is on my arm already with a halo, because one of my friends took his own life, and his birthday was that day, right? That all comes together. And like, I wasn't gonna see. I'm gonna show you something too. Maybe this will be a lesson. So I brought this up. This is a sculpture I did at RISD in '98, and it was carved out of plaster. And I when I first got back here, you getting like that. I don't want to be, here. I left this life behind. I started throwing away old art, trying to clean up stuff for my parents, and I left this outside because I wasn't proud of this. And the hand was supposed to be my father's on here and mine. And wasn't even thinking about that. And he was sick, right? And I didn't know how long he was going to have. I put it outside this window, which ended up being the room that he died. And on my birthday, my dad died 3 days after my birthday. And there was a moment where I said, Dad, like, it's my birthday. He was waiting for my birthday, kept on asking about it. He couldn't talk at the end, couldn't open his eyes. Pancreatic cancer is terrible. And I held his hand like this. And I said, Daddy, can you believe it? I got your sister. My sisters reunited. The grandkids are here for the first time since my high school graduation in '98, like all this stuff. And, I'm crying, and he's trying to open his eyes. And we held hands like this. And then it was a month later that I realized that this sculpture now, like one of my team members was like, that's beautiful. I'm like, I didn't think this was beautiful
right
a month or two ago, but that's where the time comes into play. right?
Right.
You can be doing, just put it all out there. Something that you already created might stand the test of time and become beautiful later because the story made it beautiful in the end. And so I think that's like the big revelation. Like, I don't know how it all it's something super deep. I can't really put it into one word, but like this experience of like, this is just one example of that, going through my past, going to the present, how far
Right.
my career has come. You laid it all down yourself all this time. You just have to have the patience.
Right.
And I think that's sort of the thing I learned about, maybe it's more about life. I don't know, like, but it's kind of about myself too. Like I trusted myself in the beginning and it paid off in a way, and people believed in me too. And that is also the payoff. So I try to pay that back with the people around me.
And I think it's a beautiful story and arc of just believing in yourself, and that power of, always in talking to my friends who are artists and creators, we always talk about kind of pixels and hues and paint and color, but time is an equal element as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a hard lesson to learn in the career too. It's like, oh, sometimes as you move up, you're like, I don't love the way this like alignment is here. Does that really matter? Just put it out. Let's see how it does. So you have to pick your battles, too, and just get it out there. And so that's a balance, a new balance that people have to face. We want every little pixel to be perfect. But now with this whole data centric model, you get into a fight, actually we don't know the answer. We don't know what people prefer. Look at TikTok. Some of that super rough stuff is the stuff that hits. And then people spend 3 days on a piece and then no one looks at it, So I think there's a lot to learn.
And it's kind of refreshing, as a traditionally trained marketer, it's awesome to go in and not know what's going to hit.
Yeah.
To do things
that's exciting. Yeah.
That's exciting, and be pleasantly surprised and be refreshed as to, how people are evolving, how their engagement with the work that you create is evolving, and what your next move is in challenge to be.
Yeah. And I'm super excited because we see all these stories about like how things could go dark, right? And like the concerns of where things could head. Right. But hopefully if the right leaders are in place that can also guide people in the right direction, all these tools, they're all there to do a lot of great things. And hopefully this younger generation is going to fill these gaps and their eyes are wide open. And who knows what to expect. I am not one of those ones that looks at Gen Z or the generation below. I don't know what it's called exactly, but I'm not one of the ones that complains and like, the boomers versus Gen Z fights. Like, I think it's great. I can't wait to see what they do. And all these tools that they have. I wish I had access to all these YouTube tutorials and all that. Like I might have skipped a few years into where I ended up.
Well, Robbie, I'd love to give you the last word. We could talk all day, but I know we have our schedule today, but I'd love to give you the last word for our audience for encouragement for the future.
Yeah. And like, I don't know what the range of experience levels are in this room, but one thing that I think when we were talking that is kind of like a line that I gave to someone on my team once about trees. Once when I was young, my mom was explaining about the fast growing trees. They're the ones that blow over in the wind and break. But the ones that grow really, really slow, like they're super strong and you want to keep those trees. I think like for anyone starting out in their career, just keep that in mind that you don't have to like, I think it's easy to compare yourself to others, especially with social media now. I don't even know what that would be like to start out your career, see all these people like spending all this money in New York and like, how can I get there? Just be a little patient and one step at a time. One day you might end up in the position I am, like you look back on 15 whatever years and like, oh wow, every step led me to this, but I would have never saw that back then. So try to be the slow growing tree, not the fast one, because people just plow through. They don't focus on the partnership, don't focus on the relationships. That's really that extra unicorn factor that gets you to the next step.
Well, Robbie, I thank you for spending this time with us today, to talk about the power of time and authentic leadership, building stories, and the power that you have in family and the work that you've done. So I appreciate you sharing. And, I think that those lessons that we put forth today are really impactful and empowering, and encourage you along the way, and keep on building those stories at HBO Max.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So thank you all for joining us for this special fall fireside chat with Robbie Tseng. As I said, creator, designer, story builder, and really great son that we're all proud of. Thank you, good sir.